Gail Hamill.
Hi, I'm Gail Hamill. I'm president of the Potomac Fiber Arts Guild. We're in Montgomery County, Maryland. We're the sort of the inner suburbs of Washington, D.C.
Okay, thank you. Deborah Amaral.
Hello, good evening. I'm currently president of the Triangle Weavers Guild, which is situated in the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area. And I'm going to add, I've also served on a number of nonprofit boards, and if I respond, it may be based on that experience as well.
Great, thank you. Margaret Briggs.
I'm Margaret Briggs. I'm founder and past president of Central Virginia Fiber Arts Guild. We're a little unique in that we were formed 3 years ago by merging 3 existing guilds in the Charlottesville area.
Any sound?
No sound on. All right, please, everybody mute if you're not a panelist.
Have you experimented with this thing?
My what?
Have you experimented with this?
All right, thank you. Charlene.
I'm Charlene Marietti, and I am currently the newsletter for the New York Guild of Hand Weavers, though I do belong to Philadelphia and the Harmony Guild in Delaware. And I've also been very involved with MAFA. So thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Weber.
Hi, I'm Kathy Weber, and I am past president of the Weavers Guild of Rochester, and also have been on a couple other nonprofit boards, and some of those answers may be from that. I've just started a new foundation, and we've been open for a year, so I'm very familiar with starting from the ground up, which I didn't used to be.
Excellent. Thank you. Elisa.
Hi, I'm Elisa Iger. I'm a past president of Jockey Hollow Weavers and their current newsletter editor. And I'm also the past president of MAFA. And I've been involved with MAFA for a number of years.
Thank you. Sharon Resnick.
Hi, I'm Sharon Resnick. I am a founder, past president, and current treasurer of the Fiber Guild of the Blue Ridge. We were formed about 4 years ago out of a desire to create a nonprofit fiber guild.
Thank you. And Laritza.
Sorry, I was muted. I am
We lost you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Laritza Rodriguez, and I am the registrar for the Potomac Fiber Arts Guild.
Okay, thank you.
I have been there for a number of years.
Thank you very much. All right, so what I'm going to do is we have a list of about 12 questions that I'm going to go through and call on each panelist who indicated that they were comfortable answering that particular question. If, as the audience, you have any questions, would you please put them in the chat, and we will answer them after we finish with each question. So the first one is, do you need bylaws versus operating procedures? And what is the difference? So Debbie, you're first.
So I'll start with the difference. So bylaws are very, very high level. They are going to give you information like the name of the organization, the address, who can be a member, is it, anybody, is it, by nomination, who are the officers, who are the directors, how to fill vacancies, also establish the minutes that you can make incidental income and can distribute it, how you like. You can amend the bylaws, and it indemnifies the officers of the organization and lists about how big, what size the board can be. I mean, so it's really kind of the definition of the organization. Versus operating procedures are how to do the detailed jobs. So say like membership, okay, as membership chair, you receive membership from a new member, you have to report it, you send a a notice to the directory chair so that person's information can get in the directory. You need to notify the treasurer or send the check on to the treasurer if it comes that way. You need to send a letter to the new member, welcoming them to the guild, and what types of things. So it's, it's very, I'm going to say, down in the weeds. And the other thing about it is operating procedures change frequently. So at one time, it was a letter that you actually mailed to the person, went to the post office type of thing. Well, today, that's an email. So those operating procedures change with the times, and may change if the guild decides that they're just going to do things a little differently. So they are two very different things. You have to have the bylaws, and while operating procedures, you don't have to have them, but it certainly makes the job of doing each position a lot easier. And it also helps a whole bunch when you have one person step down and a new person comes to fill in that position. That there, at least there's a document with the majority of it recorded that the incumbent can review, learn from, and then ask questions from there, rather than there be a scramble of the other officers and directors doing their job. And now, okay, what did membership do? What do we have to tell the new person?
Okay, thank you. Deborah, Margaret, Kathy, do you have anything to add? Also, Elisa and Sharon, I'm just going to let you all chime in. Yes, Margaret.
I'll say, if you have intent to go nonprofit, you are going to want bylaws. They also, you want them not necessarily to be too restrictive, and that's where the operating procedures can flesh out how you do it, whereas the bylaws are more about what do you need to do. If you spell out every single detail of what the guild's going to do, you can get into, it says when to have a meeting or what to do. And then if you need to make a change, you've got to do an amendment or a revision to the bylaws, which can be quite cumbersome. They're also, for some small groups, and I know there are probably a number of people here where, do you absolutely have to have bylaws? I think for some of us who've been in groups where there are no dues, where there are no officers, there's no bank account, there's no intent to ever seek nonprofit status, you may be able to not, have an informal group and not have bylaws. I think a number of us have done it. One of the three groups that we merged, we had an old guild. We had two formal guilds and a spinning group that had no structure whatsoever when we merged. So it is possible for a small informal group not to.
Thank you. And I see Deborah and Elisa both have something to add. So Lisa's at the top of my screen, so I'll go with you first.
Okay. First of all, I'm posting a link to the Jockey Hollow Weavers operations manual, so people will have an idea of how detailed these can be. And a couple of things. First of all, the bylaws are like your constitution. Your operations manual are sort of like the legal code. So if you think about the US government, you will know that the Constitution is pretty set in stone, and then laws are all over the place, and that's part of the difference. The other thing that is very important, and I'm dealing with a bylaws revision right now for Jockey Hollow, having already done one for MAFA. It's very important to make sure that when you write up your bylaws or you revise your bylaws, you do not put in stuff that is going to change or need to be changed. So you don't put in, you're going to meet at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays, on the first Wednesday of the month at the library, because that can change. You don't want to say things, one of the things MAFA had is our registered agent is going to be this company. You don't want to have those in your bylaws. Those are part of your operations manuals. Your bylaws are the stuff that you have promised to do. And if you become a not-for-profit, those are the things that you have promised the federal government and your state government that you will do. So you have to be very careful about what you promise. So.
Thank you. And I have Kathy, but I'm going to go to Deborah next because she had something to add.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say I didn't have a whole lot more to add, but that was so excellent, both of you. And what I was thinking when I raised my hand was simply looking at some of the things, if you did want to get tax exempt status as a nonprofit, might be required to be in your bylaws. So I appreciated what to leave out, too much specificity, but there might be some clauses that you want to leave in. And a very important one I've found is the dissolution clause. What happens to the assets of the organization if you do need to fold? And what the IRS is looking for there is for you to say you'll donate them to another nonprofit, basically. But they exist partly to protect the interest of the taxpayers in letting you not pay taxes. And so that's the kind of stuff they're looking at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kathy.
I think it depends upon what state you're in, but I know that in my state, theoretically, if you change anything in the bylaws, you have to resubmit everything and get it approved by the State Charities Bureau. So you want something that you can live with for a long time, and like people said, not too specific, because then it's hard to change it.
Just an example of that's, not being specific. Bylaws can say something like, as you'll meet, you'll have not at least 9 member meetings a year. It doesn't say what months, it doesn't say day, night, it doesn't say where, the time. It's just saying that as an organization, there's going to be 9 or 8 or, at least. So it doesn't say that you have to have exactly 9 or 8. There's going to be at least this many. And the location and the time and dates will be chosen by the board of directors. So those are the kind of, keep it simple. It says what you're going to do, but like everybody else has said, it leaves out those specifics that you've got the flexibility to choose and change.
Debbie just mentioned the board. So the other important thing is defining your board structure. Who are your officers? How long are their terms? And who else is on the board? Basically, who else gets a vote? Or, and if you are defining committee structures.
Okay, thank you all very much. I don't think we have any questions in the chat, so we'll move on to the next one. Somebody else have anything? Okay. Who makes a good board member, and how many do you have in your guild? And what are the key positions for your board? I think a lot of guilds probably struggle with where's the cutoff. So I started with Debbie last time, so I will start with Gail.
Okay, well, some of this is pretty obvious. My experience over the last 2 years as president of the Potomac Fiber Arts Guild is that you want responsible and organized people. We have 4 elected officers that are elected every 2 years, and we have 5 other members that are play key roles. There's the registrar, the membership, librarian, newsletter editor, and our outreach. We have 12 committees and 4 representatives to other organizations. Our key positions are the elected ones, and in my view, pretty much all the registrar and the membership head, the librarian, the newsletter, and the program manager, who works with usually with our vice president to make sure the workshops are organized well.
Thank you. Larissa, I'm going to ask you, you are comfortable talking about this. What do you have to add, or what would you like to add?
It's the same guild as Gail, so it's pretty much the same thing. People that want to work. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's people that are engaged and want to help the guild. Sometimes jobs are not easy.
Yeah.
But basically that.
All right. Then we'll go back to some of the others. Debbie, do you have anything to add?
Sure. So, I mean, first, I know it's hard to get individuals to take on responsibilities and make commitments in guilds. So sometimes we want to just say, oh, somebody said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But really, we need to look at what does the particular position require skill-wise, and does that person have those skills? You know, willingness is great, but you need somebody who's comfortable with numbers and detail-oriented to be your membership chair and to be your treasurer. You know, you can't get around that. So, you know, there's some skills that have to be looked at there. But the other thing is communication. So we all are doing this as a hobby. We all have lives, and life gets in the way of our weaving at some point or another for all of us. So as a board member, as a volunteer in the organization, that if life gets in the way, you have to be able to communicate that so that other people can pick up and carry you and carry the guild, so that the guild isn't hurt in the end, you know, if it's something that should go on for a while. So it really comes down to communication, I think, you know, in addition to having the skills, communication if things are not going well, asking for help, you need more people to help you, and just, you know, think about the guild and be willing to communicate with others and have those dialogues to come to what is really the best for the guild.
Thank you. Margaret, do you have anything to add?
I kind of smiled and said, whoever's willing to do it. And I think my fellow guild leaders will say, yeah. How many times have each of us been president? You know, show of hands. Sometimes it is hard to get people that are willing to serve on the board, and certain people do end up serving multiple terms. We also have 4 officers, and some of our key committee chairs are also voting members of the board. We took, since we were writing bylaws from scratch just 3 years ago, we were kind of taking an inclusive stance of wanting to have different voices heard that are involved in different aspects of running the guild.
Thank you. Kathy Weber, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we have a big guild and we have a big board. It's between 9 and 11 people. And that includes 4 officers who form an executive board if something needs to be done between meetings and if there's an emergency. I think when we look for new board members, we look for people that have already, that we know something about. You know, I mean, if it's a new person, I know this sounds bizarre, but we have an educational arm that offers right now 120 courses a year, and ordinarily like 180. So we look at the people in our courses and we see like what kind of work they do and what kind of responsibility they take if we don't know them well, and we interview them. We also, when people join, we ask them to fill out a survey that asks about their interests, what study groups they'd like to be part of, if they have board experience from another organization, what they feel their strengths are. And when we're looking for somebody who is an organized person or a person who has technical knowledge or things like that, we go right to those lists, and we start thinking about the people who have said that these are their skill sets.
Oh, that's extraordinary. Thank you. Elisa, and then Deborah.
Okay. We have 5 people, we have 5 positions that are on our board, the elected officers, plus the immediate past president. In my case, we have, I had a co-president, so we each have half a vote, not a full vote. Let's see, I'm looking at the chat. I'm noticing that Sally is asking whether there should be an odd or even number of members. I believe that traditionally it is an odd number of members. One of the nice things, though, about being in a organization, or the kind of organization where, frankly, it's mostly female and mostly consensus decision making, you usually don't have to worry about having a number where you can break ties in case of dissent, because usually you're working together to try to find a solution that everybody can live with, rather than having the majority decision dominate.
Thank you. Deborah, you, and then we're going to move to the chat. I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess in addition to being willing, there's a certain amount of temperament. And so vetting through watching them in workshops or whatever, I think it comes down to me, to people who want to be in meetings or do well in meetings and don't get frustrated and storm out and so forth. So, you know, I'm not saying be too judgmental, but maybe have some antenna up. And related to that, I did ask, you know, should we take nominations from the floor, which we're allowed to do, but they were like, don't encourage it. I'm a new president coming into my first election, but I'm kind of like, you know, why? And it is because we do want to have some sense of comfort about the, I guess I'm going to say, temperament of our board members in order to feel confident that we won't have conflicts. And, you know, maybe that's not fair, but I will say that's realistic.
Okay, thank you. Sharon?
Maybe it's just that we're very new, but I have found a great difficulty in having any choice on who we get to volunteer. We are really just trying to get anybody to step up into any of our leadership roles. We've not had a luxury of being able to pick and choose at this point. I hope we are able to get there. And I love the ideas that some of you have put forth about collecting member data in the beginning and developing databases. I think those are all valuable tools that we could learn from.
Yeah, I agree.
Some of that has to depend on the size of the guilds. And I know Philadelphia is at about 200 or so members. And I think Rochester's a lot larger than that. So
No, we're 183 today. You were usually between there, 185 and 210.
So I mean, you kind of have to tailor this. You know, a guild of a couple hundred versus a guild of 10. Things are going to be different.
They're very different. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're 55 at the moment.
Well, that's just growing pains. I'm going to move to the chat now. Thank you, everyone. We had, let's see, Valerie asked, Gail, do your committee members get voting rights?
Yeah, Laritza, can you help me with that?
Only the elected officials have a vote in the board.
What we definitely do also is do things by consensus. So nothing moves without consensus.
Exactly.
And Margaret, for certain, oh wait, Margaret, that's your answer.
I was answering in the
go
chat.
Ahead. Yeah, that certain committee chairs do get to vote. Got a couple more messages. I'm sorry here. Do you recommend a board be composed of we answered that. Growing new members is later. Kathy with Rochester, how many guild members do you have? I think we answered that. Okay, thank you, Patty. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. What are some of the unique challenges for leadership in a volunteer organization, aside from getting volunteers? We know that's just about number one. I'll start backwards here. Charlene.
Well, I have been very interested in the responses so far because, as I told you about your questions, many of your questions that you are talking about overall this evening really focused on leadership. And I have had a very interesting, I will say, view back, we'll say, on leadership. I've been in leadership roles in nonprofits and in the corporate world. And I will tell, my personal opinion is it's harder to be a leader in the nonprofit.
I agree with that.
I agree.
Sure.
Yes.
Doesn't work. You didn't pick them, you don't pay them, and you have no leverage over what they do. Your only commonality is share a fiber, and you hope everybody's nice and behaves nicely. I did have some little concerns. I have been in groups that attempt to control what I'll call at this point the upper level. And I think is not, I would worry about that going forward, because without consensus, you don't have a cohesive group. And back to this whole thing, you inherit these people. You have inherited members, whether you're a new group or a 50-year-old group, you've got them. It's up to the leader. Now, in this case, in the case of the guilds, it's going to be the president. You have inherited these people. Some people are wonderful, others are difficult to work with. We will grant you that. I think we'll all agree that. But it's your job as the leader to engage them, to keep them focused, and ultimately to get them to help you in a volunteer position. As I see it, a leader is in a position to make relationships with the members. Who are these people? Why are they there? Yeah, they want to come and chat, maybe sit and spin. I don't know, but there's a little more to it. In a nonprofit like ours, they're there for self-fulfillment and to learn and things like that. But what interests them? And once you can establish those links with members, it makes your ultimate job easier. Now that takes longer than 5 minutes, I'll grant you that. But once you have some sense of who your people are, you can start matchmaking. Because it's my opinion that when you get somebody to step up and help you, they rarely are going to step up. You're almost always going to have to ask them. But you need to know what their strengths are. And most of all, what they like to do. Please don't ever ask me to be a secretary. I hate it. I hate the job. I'm a terrible person at it. I should never be a secretary at anybody's organization. But that's just an example. And I think there are a couple of other things. A couple of people mentioned communication, and that's really important. And I will mention it in a minute. But you as the leader, the president, surely have a vision. Are you sharing this with your group? Where do you see your group going? And how do you see your members fulfilling that vision? I mean, nobody comes to even a Zoom meeting without some sense of, I'm really glad I'm here. I'm here to do X, Y, and Z.
Thank you.
Are more, I got a couple more things.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
Nope, I just took a breath.
Oh.
Members are more likely to be involved to help you if they understand what's involved. And too many times I hear people say, I can't get anybody to help me. And yet the job has not been defined well. Do you want to be treasurer? No, I don't think I want to be treasurer. Well, what does treasurer involve? What does the vice president involve specifically? Too often those things get left out. They're a name badge, as it were, without the underlying definitive. Now, if you have an operating manual and bylaws, you should have that written down. That doesn't mean the person you're asking for help knows where that information is. We, all of us, tend to assume that because we know how something works, well, why wouldn't they? And one of the big things, my fourth and last point really is reward your members, give them credit, thank them, tell them when they've done well. They respond phenomenally to things like that. And I think it's this underlying foundation that is really the glue that holds together these groups and guilds that are very effective and have enough volunteers to help. Okay, I'll quit.
Thank you, Charlene. That was really great. Do any of the other board members or the panel members have
Sarah,
anything?
Elisa has her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think Charlene hit about on everything, but I wanted to point out to everybody that one of the challenges of being a leader in a volunteer organization is that people vote with their feet. If they're not happy about what's going on, they may not tell you. They're just out of there. It's the problem that we have with as a corporate, in a corporate environment. It's their job. They might not like it. They have to suck it up because paycheck and benefits are like important. If it's a volunteer organization, if they don't like it, we happen to have a lot of guilds in our area. So, if I don't like what's going on in Jockey Hollow, maybe I'll go to Palisades Guild, or maybe I'll go to Francis Irwin. So you have to be aware of your membership, and that's also probably why we have a consensus sort of decision making, both within the board and with the membership in terms of making decisions. So that's just kind of what I wanted to remind people about. People won't speak up, they'll just walk. And when you see your membership declining, that's when you can tell that there's something wrong.
Thank you. Larissa?
I have been the registrar for I don't know how many years at the Guild. And the thing that I find the most difficult is dealing with no offense to anybody, with the older members that have limited or no computer skills. It takes a lot of patience to be able to tell them, this is where you go, this is what you do, this is your username, this is your password, over and over and over again. Our guild is large, it's 300 plus members, and every year it grows by a little, it shrinks by a little, but that is the most consistent problem I have found.
Okay, thank you. Charlene, you have something?
I do. I do. I think, and I think Larissa started to mention a part of it. Groups, especially those that are well established, often have an old guard that wants to stay in control. And in my opinion, that is not healthy to the group. The more you can involve every member, if possible, we know that's not possible, but even if it's something like cleaning up after or putting away a chair, I mean, if they're involved, then they feel part of the group. And restricting who can do what, or unless there's a valid, I mean, we know there are crazy people too that are also here and we don't want them involved. But many times it's the aspect that I don't want change. I want it to be like it always was, how I've always done it. And I do not think that's healthy for groups, including guilds. Thanks.
I saw Kathy, did you have your hand up?
I did. Two problems that we've seen. One is bringing in new members and bonding them to the group. So I feel like if people don't make friendships and find a home within the guild within the first year or two, they're gone. We lose those people. So we've done things like assign mentors to sit with these people at meetings, to call and invite them to various study groups, or places where they can get to know people. That's one problem that I feel we have as a guild, and probably everybody does if you have a big guild. And the second one is transferring institutional knowledge from, I guess, the old guard to the up and comers, because often the old guard has 20 and 30-year-old friendships, and they're not looking necessarily for new people to work with, but for the good of the organization, you need to transmit knowledge of how to do things or how you might do things, and bring in new people to learn so that they'll be ready to take big responsibilities.
Thank you, Kathy. Larissa, do you have another comment, or is your hand just still up from last time?
No, I have a couple more comments. One of the things that has helped us a lot is the mailing list. We have a mailing list that it's pretty well organized. It's independent of Google groups, of IO groups. We manage it, we pay for it monthly, and it works very well.
What
So
does it do? Like, could I just ask you to clarify?
it works pretty much like a Yahoo group where everybody receives the emails from everybody, but it's a listserv.
Okay.
So we can send emails to our membership, and very quickly we have that makes us a very cohesive group, even though we're so large.
Okay.
And the other thing is, I don't know if Gail has the same impression as I do, but since COVID started, we have not missed one single guild meeting. Everything has happened online, and everything has worked flawlessly for the most part. And that has kept our group together, and every single month for the last year, we have had new membership.
Okay, thank you.
And one big problem, I'm sorry, the last one, is, is the study groups. When you have newcomers, they are interested in the study groups. Well, the study groups are usually limited in number of people that can belong to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the older members, the older guild members don't want to open up to 15 to 16 or whatever. And the new guild members don't feel comfortable joining a group or creating a new group.
Okay.
So that is one thing that might deter newcomers, is the limitation of the study groups.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to the chat now. Patty,
Sure.
I think,
It
go ahead.
looks like Valerie has a question. Do any of you solicit input from membership as to what they would like to see or have the guild offer? If so, what format to use? And a number of people answered in the chat that they do have surveys. I don't know if that's something you want to have other people respond to now, or
Well, let's save that to the end.
okay. And also, I'll say that I will save the chat. So there are a lot of little details in here, and that we'll have that when we put the video on
Yeah.
the website.
Right, and that's great. Thank you. I'm going to, we have for the board members, I'm going to skip question number 4 simply because we sort of already answered that. And I'm going to go on to the next one. Do you have a line of leadership succession? And if, how do you determine what it is? For example, is your vice president targeted to be the president in the next time around? That sort of thing. And I'll start with, let's see, Debbie again, just because you're first on my list.
So Philadelphia does not have a prescribed order of taking the positions. They do have a nominating committee, and so it is the nominating committee that seeks out nominations, and based on the skills and the desire, and has, at least during my term and since, has had a wonderful person that is incredibly adept at getting people. She's got the right niceness and the understanding, and it's not arm twisting. It doesn't feel like arm twisting, but that's what it is. But it just doesn't feel that way. So Philadelphia does not have a succession that way. I am a member of a guild that does, where you are vice president 1 year, you're expected to be president the next, and then the past president the year after that. So you're basically committed to a 3-year stint as vice president, president, and past president.
Thank you. Kathy, do you have a comment? Anything to add?
We don't have succession either. But we do sometimes, often, my case was I was a board member and and before my hitch was up, I was asked to be vice president. Before I finished vice president, I was asked to be president. Those are all usually 2-year hitches. And after you've been president, you are archivist, which means you are supposed to get all the documentation together for the 2 years after you've been president. And you're also supposed to attend every meeting and be a non-voting advisor. So it's sort of like succession, but not really. It provides a little bit of continuity, I think.
Thank you. Elisa.
We do not have succession, and one thing that I would think is might be an issue with succession is that the skill set that you need for the different positions are different. A wonderful treasurer might not be the best person to be vice president programs. A person who's really good at secretary might not be the best one. Although actually, I suspect the secretaries would be good at being the president because, just trying to run the meeting. So I find it interesting that some guilds do have a succession like that, but otherwise we have a nominating committee that goes out and tries to create a slate of potential officers because we really don't have that many people that are interested in the jobs, and a certain amount of arm twisting and badgering and bribing may be necessary in order to have people serve as officers.
And I'd like to just clarify on the point I made of the succession. That guild, it's vice president, president, past president. That line of succession does not include secretary and treasurer.
Okay.
All right. And Larissa, I have you down here. Did you want to add something?
No, in our guild, the vice president is usually the incoming president, but we do have elections. They're lined up, but the president is elected again.
Thank you. We'll go to the chat now.
I see Sally has her hand raised.
And Sharon as well. Okay, Sally?
Well, I had to say that the one thing that I saw happen one time when I was sort of a new weaver is, somebody stood up and said, I've been president of this guild or whatever the position was. I've been president of this guild for 4 years or 6 years or whatever it is. And I am just done. We need somebody to serve in my role. And it was just, I know they were frustrated and everything, but I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's, they just made it like such an unattractive position. And I'm sure that stuck in a lot of people's heads, regardless of what the position was. I don't even remember. It was just that it just seemed like too much work. So when I volunteered as a new weaver to do something, the thing is that when I did it, I ended up doing it for 20 years almost, but I recognized the advantages of doing it. And particularly for new weavers, the first thing I volunteered for was a newsletter. And I had like 5 reasons why it was really advantageous to do the newsletter. And, when I was vice president or whatever, when I was with programming or when I was co-president at Jockey Hollow in the past, I tried to look at the benefits of that position so that when it was time to look for somebody else to serve in that position, it wasn't like, it's this many hours a week and you have to do this and this and this. It was like, well, if you decide to do this, here's the benefits of that. And so that I just wanted to point that out when you're thinking about, and maybe that's the secret sauce to Debbie's person at the Philly Guild when she gets people to volunteer.
Okay, thank you. Sharon.
For our guild, we have a 5-member board and we don't have any vice presidents. We have a president, secretary, and treasurer, and then we have the chairs of our outreach committee and our programs committee as our 5 members. But when we do our elections, we stagger them each year. We change 3 members or 2 members of the board every time we have an election. So there's never a completely new board at any time.
Okay, thank you. Patty.
Yeah, it looks like there are a number of questions about term limits and what's the typical term limit for the guilds.
And so I'll ask the panel members just to chime in.
2 years.
Yeah, we don't have term limits.
It's not a limit, but it's a 2-year service.
Yeah, we do too.
And after 2 years, can they continue on, or what happens?
Rarely.
Yeah.
Usually it's 2 years in the position you're in, but you might continue in another position on the board.
Okay.
That way, and we also move like half the board goes off 1 year and half the next year, so it's similar to what someone else mentioned.
Okay. Anybody else on the
Sure.
panel?
I want to offer for Triangle Weavers that we do have term limits. You can serve up to 2 consecutive 1-year terms. Then you might have to go away, and then you could possibly come back and do that again.
Okay.
In
Anyone
our,
else?
yeah, in our operations manual for Jockey Hollow, we recommend that the president and vice president is also programs, serve no more than two-year terms. It's not a hard and fast rule, but you really do need to have turnover on those particular positions. And I think it also helps, or at least I hope it helps people be interested in those jobs, because there's this real fear, I think, that when people volunteer, that they're going to be in the position for life. Because I remember that when I was president of Palisades Guild, I was into the 5th year of my presidency when I started to threaten people that I was out of there, and we were having an election and I was not standing, and they had better come up with somebody who wanted to be president, because it was, it really does get to be too much. And it also, I think, is bad for our organization for somebody to be stuck in the position and not know how to get out of it, because there's also a tendency when somebody is that entrenched that she stops seeing that other people could do the job. She just feels that she's stuck with it, and it is a horrible burden. And that also starts coming out in the way she presents things to the organization, which is not healthy.
Anyone else?
Philly has their 1-year terms. There are some suggestions that it not be more than I think it's 4 years on the board. So it doesn't necessarily, consecutive. It doesn't necessarily mean 4 years in one position. But what, like a lot of organizations, if you don't have a lot of active members, you may not have enough members to pull from to honor that, where that's the goal. But Philly has as I mentioned, a large membership. It has a very loyal membership, and so when people move out of the area, they keep their memberships. So we have members that are in Colorado. We have members in Arizona. We have members that we will probably never see again, that they just aren't traveling back to the East Coast. So you can't count those people in your numbers when it comes to having the positions and that rotation. But Philly is 1-year terms, and I believe it's a maximum of it is 4 on board, except there is a caveat for treasurer. And the treasurer position tends to be held for 5 or more years. And, Philly is a nonprofit. We have a house. So there's a lot more to treasurer for Philadelphia than for a lot of other guilds. So, not that it takes a year to learn it, but it takes a while to get acclimated to all that the treasurer has to be doing at Philadelphia. And it almost makes sense to continue that for a period of time. One of the things is, there's an IRS filing that they have to do every year. So, it's more complicated than a lot of other guilds.
Thank you. Margaret.
I just want to say the size and demographics of a guild make a big difference on some of this. when I was president of our then small weaving guild with about 40 members, and most of our members were retirees and had moved to the area, I got the sense that it wasn't that anybody thought the job was too hard or I was making it unattractive when I stood up there every time for a year saying, hey, we need a new president. It's that they'd been there, done that. They'd been president of their PTA. They had retired from jobs. They had been on committees. They'd been on boards. They'd been on this and that. And our members, I'm talking about people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s who just, they were happy to come to meetings, but they were really not in the mindset of taking on leadership positions. Now that we have a guild of 140 members and more younger members, I think some of the ideas that we're talking about tonight of how do you engage people, how do you make it seem like it's a fun and interesting thing to do, those are things we're really going to have to start to think about. But the nature, the inherent nature of the members sometimes means that they just, and I see some of my Virginia colleagues here saying, if you've got a small guild, it's sort of whoever's willing to volunteer, which means, speaking to what some other people, sometimes you do get some personality, sometimes you do get some people that aren't necessarily a good fit, and that can be a little bit challenging.
Thank you. I'm going to move on. Time has kind of flown here. We have about 40 minutes left, but several other questions that I think are pertinent. We've talked a little bit about how you get members to volunteer. And I don't know if anybody else has, a couple of people had surveys for members, which to see what their skills are and interests are. I think that's brilliant. Does any of our panel, do you have anything else to add that could help the rest of us?
Beg.
I would like to add something.
Sure.
The Zoom meetings I found, we have an open chat or visiting time before the meeting starts. And I have found that there's a lot of helping each other out with their questions about whatever, and sharing resources and selling things or giving things to other people. And I would like to see that continue when we're not on Zoom anymore, because I think that's the way to get people involved in the Guild and feel like they are contributing to the Guild. I'd like to hear comments on that.
Debbie?
So Philadelphia has had, when I was president, they had it in place, portable fibers. And so again, the Guild has a house, so some of what they can do is a little different. And so that meant every Tuesday, 10 a.m. for 2 hours, you could bring whatever was portable to work on, and met at the Guild. And it was purely social. It wasn't a program. It wasn't, the agenda was, there was no agenda. And it started out with probably, I'd say about 8-10 people. And the library is right there. So somebody would say something, pull a book down, and there was a camaraderie that was built. And then the group grew a bit. And then we started, I don't want to say splintered off, but those that were interested in dyeing would be in the kitchen doing some dyeing, and some others would be, at the table in the other room talking about weaving. And what happened really was we got to get to know each other. It wasn't just coming in, sitting down for the presentation, and then the night's over and you do a little chit chat, but it's late and you want to get home. We had 2 hours to make up what we wanted to talk about. And it was, I know as my term as president, that is where and how I found people. I knew I'd spent 2 years once a week with these people, and I knew kind of what their skills were. I kind of knew what their interests were, and I also, we were friends. So it's hey, you know what? We need an editor, and I will say, we've talked an awful lot here about how hard it is to get people to do jobs, and that nobody volunteers. And I think we all need to look at our host today, because Sarah Robbins volunteered for many positions during my terms, and I can't thank her enough for it. But she's definitely the outlier, because she would say, I think I can do that. I'd like to do that. Our only problem was probably stretching her too thin and then having to find somebody to backfill some of the positions.
Thank you, Debbie. Elisa and Deborah both have their hands up. So Elisa?
Oh, I do have my hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh. You have a thumbs up and a hands up. Deborah.
Okay. I just wanted to add a couple of things. And we also have had in-person drop-ins in the building that we rent, where we rent rooms. And those were Tuesdays and Saturdays from, let's see, 1 to 4 p.m. And we've continued that online from on just Tuesdays and Saturdays, but just from 1 to 2 p.m. And people take turns hosting that online or hosting that in person. I also think our study groups have been a really great way to achieve what Debbie was just describing, which sounds really similar, where people are breaking out in terms of their interests, and they might or might not be doing that in our rental rooms, might or might not be at the same time as our drop-ins. But something else that we do is advertisements, and we'll put those in the newsletter, maybe even online, for positions or for volunteers for specific things. I do think that building the relationships is so important, in addition to the surveys and everything else, to figure out what people's interests are, and expertise and so forth. And that has been just so much more challenging during the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to more in-person time before meetings. In our actual monthly meetings, we do have in Zoom a breakout, and sometimes we do 2 of those for about 10 minutes or so, which is great. And I'm often running the meeting, and I bop around between the breakout groups and see how they're doing or if they have questions or anything. And I invite people back into the main room if their group's too small or whatever, they're not interested in what they're talking about. And sometimes those chats have been really, really helpful for me for feedback about the Guild, but also things that people are interested in and might even want to volunteer to do.
Thank you. I'm going to move to the chat now because I want to get to some of these other questions, and just thank everybody again for all of their input. It's been great. Patty, do we have anything in the chat?
Sarah, there is one that looks like it's number 10 on our list, if we get that far, but it's probably worth discussing soon. What is the advantage to becoming a nonprofit 501c3? That seems to be...
Let's move on to that question. We can actually go on to that. And it looks like I have quite a few people who are willing to talk about this. And I'm actually going to call on Charlene first, because Charlene told me she researched this, and the other panelists have experienced it firsthand. But I'm curious about your research. So,
well, Elisa was part of this. Elisa, Aaron, when I was vice president of MAFA, we really looked at it. It is an issue to become, I mean, it's wise. All the information that I found was that if you are an organization and you have a treasury, you really need to register as a nonprofit. Now, if you only have $100, no big deal. But if you have thousands of dollars, it's another problem. My daughter is a lawyer and has also been researching this. And I know of a guild who has a lot of money. And I said, she said, my daughter, lawyer daughter, said to me, well, how much money are we talking about? And I said, thousands. And her eyebrows went up. She said, it really puts you in the position, if the IRS finds that, why do you have that much money? What are you doing with it? And if you haven't registered as a nonprofit, then you cannot justify what you have been doing as a legally responsible caretaker of the money, in other words. MAFA did a lot, as Elisa know. Elisa, you're out there, I hope. I know Elisa worked hard on this too, right?
Yeah.
And we really never got it cut and dried. And I honestly would like to hear somebody who specializes in this aspect of the law to talk to organizations like ours In some cases, and this is another option, I belong to an organization that was the main organization, and I'm going to use MAFA. It isn't MAFA, but I'm just going to use it for an example here. An organization that covered, in fact, it was an international coverage of groups. And then under that umbrella, they could function as a nonprofit. So that is an option, and we've just never gotten that far. I really think that legal advice. Lisa, over to you.
Okay. Yes, we've been discussing this, doing the umbrella 501c3 for MAFA for a number of years. Now, one of the issues that we do have is that the rules vary from state to state. However, something I want to point out to everybody, if you are an organization, most of the time you need insurance. If you do not legally exist, in other words, you are not a corporation, and you ever have to claim on your insurance, you'll discover that the insurance is very much into taking your premiums, but you will not be able to take a claim on that insurance should something happen because you don't exist. Now, some states allow, for example, unincorporated organizations to have a checking account. New Jersey is not one such. So we're kind of limited in, we must be incorporated. If you're incorporated, you need to file with the state, and you also have to file with the IRS. If you are not a not-for-profit, you are a small business. This means that a bunch of your dues monies is going to be siphoned off to pay the IRS because it is income. A 501c3, a not-for-profit, has the advantage of saying, look, here's my money. I'm doing something of benefit for the general public and for the community. And the IRS basically says, yes, you can keep your money and put it into your mission rather than giving it to us so that we can distribute it to the greater community. So that's basically the deal with the 501c3. And
there's also a
501. There's two different ones.
That's a different one. And yeah. That's why I don't know the difference between the two. That's why I wish we had.
Yeah, I think we need to find a lawyer who specializes in this so that we can actually get some straight answers, because we've been looking for years. So we can say, my group is a 501c3. I can walk people through how to apply for this, because we were one of those unfortunate groups that lost our 501c3 because we failed to file with the IRS. There's something called a Form 990N, which is very simple. It's just a postcard. You tell them who your new officers are and that you're not making a lot of money, and you
under
have to
50,000 it is.
Yeah, it's very easy to do, but if you miss it, they can rescind your 501c3 and then you have to reapply, and that will cost you a lot of time and a good chunk of money. So you have to be very careful about that.
Thank you. I know that Kathy has something to add, but I want to go to Sharon from the Blue Ridge, because you had direct experience, I believe, with it.
Yeah. I was one of the founders of our guild, and I basically did the entire process of the paperwork side of it, setting up our corporation as a not-for-profit Virginia corporation, applying for tax exempt status with the IRS, which is what 501c whatever status is. You can be a nonprofit and not be a 501c3. 501c3 is tax exemption. They're different things. Our guild, our guild grew out of a guild that dissolved because primarily they had been operating as an LLC, which cannot be a 501c3 per IRS rules. And they, for years, were trying to get the guild nonprofit 501c3 status, but as an LLC, because they had formed like that, it was absolutely impossible. There's no trick. There's no way you can do it. So the former guild had to dissolve. or the LLC members could be liable for paying taxes on dues money raised, etc. All of those kinds of things that we want to avoid. So we started this new guild specifically to be a 501c3 nonprofit. So there was no question for us to answer going in of whether or not we wanted to be one. That was our assumption from day one. So at that point, it's a lot of paperwork. I mean, really, it's defining your articles of incorporation for whatever state you're in. Every state's going to work differently, which includes setting up bylaws, which we've already discussed some. Operating procedures, by the way, are completely not legal. They're an internal document. Bylaws do go to the state or the IRS, and maybe both. I don't remember.
Both.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very important that you're careful about what goes into those bylaws. Whereas your operating procedures should have the kitchen sink in them about how you run your day-to-day operations.
Sharon, why did you decide to incorporate instead of just doing nonprofit? Because we're also in Virginia, and we did not incorporate.
I guess it's just the structure that I'm used to, and I've done a number of nonprofits in different states. Actually, I've worked with many startups, both for profit and nonprofit. So I'm very familiar with the corporate structure, and Virginia non-stock corporations are perfectly suited for nonprofits. It's simple. It's a $25 annual fee that we pay to the state, and it's simple reporting requirements. So, and that was my main reason for going that route.
Kathy.
I'm in New York State, and you have to be incorporated before you can be a not-for-profit here. But you can be incorporated and not go to the next step. Like some people, if they're small, maybe the first thing is you're an informal group, and the next thing is you incorporate. And my guild was incorporated for a long time before they went for non-profit status. But you can't have that without being a corporation, or you can do it at the same time. My new foundation, this is how long it takes. It took a year and a half working with our lawyer to do all the bylaws and all the paperwork with the feds, and then with the state to even be ready to open for business.
Thank you. Patty, you want to move to the chat?
Yes, that's actually goes in line with what Kathy was talking about. There was a question about whether you have to be incorporated to register for a 501c3. And so it sounds like that might vary state to state.
Yeah.
And I should also point out that Karen Miller, our past president for MAFA, noted that there's a lot of information on this on the MAFA website. So she put the link in the chat. And let's see, a couple other things. Do we need a mission statement if we're a nonprofit?
It's a good thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of need that no matter who you are.
Yeah.
Right. And then here's another question. Do you have to have a lawyer to apply for a 501c3?
No.
I don't think so.
No, we did it on our own.
You don't have to have one. The instructions are really good. You have to have a person that likes reading detailed federal government documents and can make sense out of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's actually a good idea, if you can afford it, to have an attorney look at both your application and bylaws. I think that's just good diligence, but if you can't afford it, you don't need it. And if you're simple, you don't need it.
But you also probably have somebody that you can beg. Somebody in your group has got to have a spouse, or somebody in your group may even be a lawyer, and they can give some kind of review. I know I had my sister-in-law look over the bylaws from AFA when we did the revision.
I second that. and a similar the same thing of somebody's husband or sister or cousin in your organization, as far as your books being reviewed by an accountant. There's probably somebody out there that has a neighbor-friend relation that can be, you know, a third party to look at those as well.
Kathy, and then I want to, we have about 20 minutes left. We have
So
a few
just
more
another possibility is going to a fairly good sized law firm or even a small one and ask them if they would help you pro bono.
Yeah.
That's a good
And
idea.
then they will back it through their firm, whatever they say. When you ask for friend or relative information, a lot of times, you know, people will give you good information, but they can't legally back it, and they don't want to because it's outside their professional responsibility purview, I guess I would say.
Thank you. Patty, do we have any other questions? This is an important topic. I don't.
No, we
wanna
have a
make it
couple
right.
of raised hands though, Charlene,
Oh, okay.
Deborah.
Deborah, go ahead.
Okay, and Debbie, there's more than one Debbie here. So Debbie Cummings?
Oh, Deborah
Deborah.
Amara.
Deborah Amaral.
Actually, let Debbie go first, please.
Okay.
She wants to.
So I just wanted to say, you know, we're talking about all this, you know, and there is work to become 501c3 if you're not, and there's some filing. And so, you know, some people are probably wondering, oh my gosh, you know, is there an upside to this? And I can say one of the upsides is that you can get grant money. So it depends where your guild is, but Philadelphia is in the city of Philadelphia. And by being a nonprofit, they are then eligible for grant money. And I know that the guild gets, I believe it's a sizable amount, and it goes a long ways at the guild. So what we have to do on an annual basis to maintain that 501c3 is far less than of a hassle or work as compared to the benefit of that grant that we get on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm ready to go. I just had a bunch of notes and a bunch of them had been already said by others, but I think something that I heard mentioned, but we kind of skipped past it, was that by becoming incorporated, you get protection of the individuals if there's a lawsuit. And that was something I struggled a lot with board members in another nonprofit to help them understand when we were looking at purchasing property like a house on land. So I don't know if that's true in every state, if that's a federal thing, but for us in North Carolina, that was a big, big, big deal in terms of getting our board members to agree that we could own property.
Thank you. Charlene?
Quick, I have to fulfill my obligation to give credit where credit is due. I did not know Karen Miller was on this call, and she worked very hard on the nonprofit information that is on the MAFA site, and she has posted in the chat. Thank you, Karen. I also wanted to say one more thing. If you're looking for a lawyer, you really need to find somebody with expertise in setting up a 501c3 or incorporating whatever, because lawyers, like doctors and every other profession, have specialties.
Yes, I'm a lawyer and I can attest to that.
Yes, exactly.
Do you specialize in 501c3s?
International trade.
Oh,
Shucks.
We can only aspire.
Patty, anything else in the chat?
It looks,
Need to address?
yeah, there are responses to questions in the chat.
Okay.
That people
And that
should
will
get.
be available later. So speaking of insurance was mentioned, and one of the question is do you need insurance? And I guess if you're a 501c, you are covered, or is that something different?
No.
But Kathy,
Yeah, I think you do need insurance. I mean, it depends. I hear some people have like a house or they have property. We have a rental facility that we use for teaching. It's pretty good size. We have in the front 40 looms, and we have a back room for dyeing or for like people sitting around a table in good times, you know, knitting or whatever for classes. So we need both liability insurance if someone should trip and get hurt or something like that, And we also have insurance for our equipment, so that if there were a fire or a flood that destroyed our equipment, we would have the value of, you can insure for partial value or full value, depending on what your budget is. And we also incorporate in that package insurance for our holiday sale. We insure for liability there. You can also insure for if people steal somebody's goods and you pay for it. But so far, our guild has anteed up in the few times that we've had things stolen to cover the price of it for the person who lost something.
Thank you.
But yeah, we do have insurance. And I would say also for people who are scared when they are maybe buying under more individual risk than you ordinarily are on a board, there are two things you can do. One is maybe you want to purchase board and officers insurance for a year. For my tiny board, it's like $387. It's not a lot. And that will cover you at the level of making decisions that an ordinary person would see as being reasonable. That's the legal definition. You don't have to be functioning at the CPA or attorney level in your decision making. However, if you're embezzling or something, you're on your own. Your insurance does not cover you for
Yes.
that.
Deborah A.
Thank you. I was on a call earlier today with, actually I was on two other Zooms earlier today where some of these topics came up and I learned a lot, which I feel like I should pass along. And one thing, maybe it's just obvious, is that you want to do a lot of vigilance and diligence to make sure that you have things in place to protect people, and that's pretty clear. And this, of course, this came up in the context of reopening after COVID, and so people talk quite extensively about things like waivers that they get people to sign if they're going to come to a workshop, and putting up front, you will wear a mask, you will, take your temperature and so forth. And you're probably familiar with all those things because of this year. But by having that up front, getting people to sign an agreement to it, and then being enforcing of it, quite evidently while the workshops are happening or the meetings are happening and so forth, can go a long way to protecting you from anyone possibly trying to claim they got COVID from one of your meetings. And I think that extends even further in terms of any kind of nuisance hazards there might be, where people might get hurt. And I did see in the chat someone talking about the person who might have fallen on the way in. You definitely do need insurance. We pay $475 a year, and other nonprofits I've been working with similarly $400 to $500 a year. And I think if you have some specific features, you can get those covered maybe for like another $100. Like if you have a special big event or something, you might want to add some coverage for that. And I do think you want to be as clear as you can be with what you think the risks really are, and make sure those are covered. Be kind of like thinking, what's the worst thing that could happen? And then maybe back off from that a little bit, because how likely is that really to happen? And so, yeah, insurance is very important. The rate's going to depend on what's covered and also how large the group is and the types of activities. And I highly recommend it.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to just ask a question about, this has to do with money again. When you have holiday sales, do you report taxes on the sales? How do you handle that? Kathy?
We have a great treasurer, and actually we now have 3 people involved in treasurer tasks. We've split like the Weaving Fiber Arts Center off as belongs to one person. Another person does holiday sale. Another person does overall guild things that aren't those 2. And basically they're apprenticing to the person that used to do it all. Let's see, I'm forgetting what your question is.
It's about, yeah, about sale reporting.
Okay, so I
charges
talked to my treasurer about this because this was like an area where the magic was happening, but I didn't know really what it was. She said everything that comes in is reportable. Everything that goes out is reportable. When we have a holiday sale, the guild gets 25% of the take, and the people who are submitting goods, they get the rest of it. They get 75% of their cost, and then the guild gets 25% to pay off their costs and also make a profit. All of this is reported to the federal and state tax authorities, and the guild does pay the taxes, and the people in the guild who submit things to the sale do not pay the taxes.
Okay.
Because they're not acting as individual contractors, they're all covered under the umbrella of the guild.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great. Elisa.
We do the same thing at Jockey Hollow Weavers. You absolutely have to pay your sales tax, and because it's not advisable to tell, you say to your members, oh, well, you'll just remember to pay the sales tax on what you sold. That doesn't fly. We take a percentage of sales and we pay for the venue, and we also pay the sales taxes out of that. We have an incredible inventory system that allows us to mark the things that are taxable and those that aren't, because obviously things like hand-dyed yarn or spinning fiber are not taxable. Apparel, actually clothing is not in New Jersey, but things like kitchen towels are taxed.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make sure that we know what was sold, what has tax, and our wonderful treasurer, who's also a wonderful weaving instructor, make sure that that money gets paid.
Thank you. Let's see. What about the chat, Patty? Anything?
Now it's nope. It sort of ended with questions about other benefits to being a 501c3. So.
Yes, now I do see the chat here, bringing in new members.
Yes, that's just
that's what I wanted to squeeze in here in the last few minutes. So I'll move on to that. It's how do you bring in new members, and how do you bring in younger members? One of the problems with guilds, some guilds failing, is that they age out. And if the panel could just address new members and young members. So Laritza, do you have your hand up?
Yes. I saw the question about engaging new people up earlier in the chat, and I looked at that particular guild website, and there's no information on the programs. I had a very hard time finding out where the meetings are. It's only the date and the name of the program. You have to engage people through the website. Google search is a wonderful thing. If your website is properly created, is properly indexed, people will find you. If you have 3 pages with no information, even if people do find you, which would be difficult, they're not going to be interested because. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just because we're running out of time. Thank you. I'm gonna move on to somebody else who may have a suggestion for new members and younger members. Anybody? Oh, Deborah. Deborah A.
Yeah, we have a lot of events. We go to a lot of outreach events, setting up displays, so we have a lot of contact with public, and talk to them about joining. We also do have a website, and it does, I think, a pretty good job of telling people how they can get involved and joining. And word of mouth seems to be very effective as well. As far as the younger members go, we have a sale once a year, and we've had some younger members participating in that. And they, this year online, did an unbelievable job of promoting it on things like Instagram. And they had like Instagram being taken over by some of the artists and stuff. And I think that was very effective. So the social media, kind of live, real-time social media while an event's occurring with people who have followers, I'll call that word of mouth too, but it was amazing.
Thank you. Elisa.
Yes, we do have our show and tell actually is a bit of an outreach event, but we do have our outreach person on this call if she's willing to speak to it. Sally.
Oh, Sally has her hand up. Okay.
Unmute yourself.
Okay, I just unmuted. That could almost be a whole nother topic for a roundtable, and we touched on it at an earlier roundtable. But one thing is, go to where the audience is that you want to attract. And I do the Teen Arts Festival, which has been virtual for the second year in a row, but I design a whole demonstration opportunity based on doing this at a community college where kids are going to be going off to college in textile or fiber arts programs. So that's a different demonstration than when I do an adult weave-in at the national park, and I'm feeding those people that come for that outreach opportunity to a one-day weaving workshop class that then leads also to the guild where they can rent equipment and get books and connect with other people. And then that might be different than, say, an outreach at a museum where you're giving a presentation and you're going to meet people that are probably more likely to join a guild. Maybe at a library would be another place. Design presentations that are outreach, yarn stores. Maybe you need to go there and hang out. I think listening to new members when they join and designing programs that meet their interest, even if it's kind of boring for the long-term members who maybe they've covered summer and winter 30,000 times. But if a new member comes in and says, well, I've always wanted to do summer and winter, maybe come up with a program that will be interesting, to your long-term members that would cover that topic pretty quickly before they lose interest. So those are just a couple quick off the top of my head, but we, again, COVID has kind of stopped our outreach efforts, but once I get vaccinated, I'm sure we'll be resuming a lot of that, because that is just really important. And hopefully that could be a whole roundtable topic at some point in the future.
Sure. Yes. Absolutely. Debbie
So,
C.
so Sally hit all the big points there. But what I would like to add is that weaving is a niche hobby. So if you look at the number of people who are weavers versus the number of people who, I don't know, are sailboaters or campers or, I don't know, even stamp collectors, they have whole auctions dedicated to stamps. I haven't seen an auction yet dedicated solely to weaving items and that has 1,000 items in it. So we are a smaller group. So when we think about getting new members, we're not going to get 10 new members in a year, or we shouldn't expect to get big numbers of new members in 1 year. It's going to be kind of an incremental type of build. The other thing to remember is floor loom weaving has a relatively high barrier to entry. It costs a lot of money to buy looms and the equipment and the yarn, and it goes on and on and on. And it has a very steep learning curve. So, there will be people who try it and then say, this is just a lot more than I thought. And that will, be the end of their weaving career. Now, of course, everybody here started it, fell in love with it, and has stayed forever. But there are some that don't, and like I say, a lot of money, and it's a steep learning curve.
And I think maybe one of the keys to reaching out to more than just your weavers, to reach out to all your fiber artists, if that is the type of guild that in fact you have that welcomes, all fiber artists. And Sally. And then we're going to wrap up.
I had one more point, and that was that, yes, it's important to look to where you can get new members that fit the demographic of your guild. And as Sarah just pointed out, some guilds are multi-fiber guilds, and some are mostly spinning or mostly weaving. You know, some are more narrowly focused in one or two, and maybe not all of them. But if you have programs and events that appeal to your current membership, your membership has friends that are outside, and then they can bring people in as well. And again, it will be, I call it the organic or the slow growth type of thing. And it just, not in weaving, but in other organizations I've been in, I can remember going to meeting upon meeting, membership meeting, and they stand up there, we need new members, we need new members. And I really felt slighted that I'm paying dues, I am a member, and you keep talking about the people we don't have and what we have to do for them. Well, what about kind of me? You know, I'm the one paying dues right now. And it brings me back to a childhood song that said, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold.
Thank you. We're going to take Sally's comment and then just take a quick look at the chat, but try and wrap this up pretty quickly here.
Just a quick maybe hint or trick is and it dovetails on what Deb said, if somebody is visiting your meeting, you've already kind of got them a little bit, okay, that the hook has been baited. So the trick is maybe you have two people. You've got your membership person who's going to establish contact, but maybe there's one or two other people in the guild who will go up and ask that person some questions. How long have you been weaving? What kind of loom do you have? What do you like to weave? And then that person needs to introduce your potentially new member to somebody else in the guild who either has the same loom, has woven that structure. You could recommend a particular book. And then that other person, so that's not just one person, but there's somebody else maybe who's also keeping an eye. And I know Elisa does this at Jockey Hollow, and we have several different people, and they form a connection. And you know, if they meet at least two people besides the membership person at that first meeting, and there's some connection formed, you're more likely to get them back. And then also if there's some kind of follow-up, if somebody's gotten their email or their contact information or found out who they are in Ravelry or what their Instagram account is, if there's some kind of a follow-up afterwards, again, why not try and put your effort into somebody who's already attended a meeting versus, you know, you're going out there fishing in the big pond. Yep. So that would just, you know, try and maximize that opportunity when they show up.
Thank you. And I'm going to thank you, everybody, all participants and panelists. I really appreciate it. This was awesome. I learned a lot. And I think that is it. We will have this available for everyone fairly soon on our website. And Patty, is there anything else in the chat? It looks like mostly comments.
Mostly comments, but I thought one, Laritza emphasized how important the website is and website indexing with Google as a key for younger members. And, you know, that wouldn't have even occurred to me. So,
yeah.
And social media, a number of people mentioned social media. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming. And we'll see about another meeting all about how to get new members. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.